G'day, and welcome to 2024. It's February already, I know, but what we're going to do today is we're going to look back on every film and TV show that I watched in January 2024, because I watched quite a lot. If it looks like I've got a really moist face, it's because I do today. It's 40 degrees, I've got the aircon pumping, so if you can hear that, sorry. But I'm going to be sat down here for a little while talking about movies, so just prepare to see me get wetter and wetter throughout the video. I know I love movies, but I don't think I love them that much. I started off 2024 on the 1st of January watching Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. A little bit late to the party on this one. It is about a toy shell called Marcel with shoes on, and it is A24's, I believe, first attempt at making a kids movie, and it is lovely. It is so fun and charming. This shell is on a quest to find its family. It's also got this sort of like coming of age vibe where it's dealing with change and the idea that we try and escape from these changes and we try and fixate on other things to distract ourselves on possible real things that you need to focus on in life. And it is so adorable. It is such a unique kids movie. It's so A24, and I mean that in the best way possible. I would just really recommend watching this movie if you haven't already. I believe it came out in 2021. It's a festival favorite. It looks beautiful. It's got this whole mockumentary vibe to it. That there is so much to love. And just watch the trailer. The trailer is one of the best trailers in so long in terms of selling what the movie is, in terms of its style, its tone, what it's about. It is a great trailer. I'd go check that out. Then I watched Scrapper, written and directed by Charlotte Regan and starring Harris Dickinson, one of the most handsome men alive, and a young new talent called Lola Campbell. It follows a young child after her mother has passed away, and she's been sort of doing it on her own, surviving on her own in present day London. Meanwhile, her dad rocks up, and they don't really know each other, and he's not the best dad in the world at all. She's not the greatest kid at all, but that's, because of what she's sort of been born into. She's a bit of a troublemaker, and she's sort of in need of that parental figure that at the start of the film, Harris Dickinson's character, who is the dad, doesn't necessarily have that to offer, but you watch them grow together throughout the film, and Lola is gonna be a star. This is by far one of the best young performances I've seen from an actor in a long time, probably since After Sun. She's incredible. They're both incredible. It's like 80 minutes long. Go watch it. It's not going to blow your mind or anything like that, but it's just a fun, charming 80-minute long romp. Then I watched Todd Haynes' new film, which everyone seems to love, except for maybe me. I don't have massive problems with Made December. I wasn't as into it as I'd sort of hoped it would be. It stars Natalie Portman as she investigates a questionable person that was in the news for being in a relationship with a young child. And it follows her, Natalie Portman's character, being an actor wanting to investigate the actual person that she's about to portray in a film. And it has some of those like weird thriller tendencies in it. It has a funny joke at the start about hot dogs that had me in stitches. But other than that, I've got to say, I was constantly just felt like I was waiting for maybe a plot beat to come in. And I feel like in the last couple of minutes of the movie, I got that. It was like the most I enjoyed this movie was in the last 2 minutes. I think it has a great ending. But the 2 hours before that, I just was left wanting more. And I don't know if that's just a me thing, but perhaps May December just wasn't for me, and that's okay. Then I watched How to Have Sex, directed by Molly Manning Walker. It is a short-ish English film. I think it was around 90 minutes long or something like that, and it follows 3 young girls as they go off on what should be their best first holiday out of school, going partying, clubbing. It should be the best holiday of their lives, except it isn't. And the plot does involve some sexual assault themes. And I don't want to go too much further into it other than that, but I think it's worth a watch. I'm obviously giving you the sexual assault warning now before you go into it. It does deal with some heavy stuff, and it really did affect me. And I mean, like, I'm still thinking about this movie to this day, and I watched this movie like 3 weeks ago now, and I'm still sort of processing certain parts of the film. I think it's so impactful in what it does, and the performances are absolutely fantastic. And I don't think enough people, at least maybe outside of the UK, are talking about this movie because it is an important film and a really, really good watch. Then I watched Saltburn. Obviously, everyone's seen Saltburn. If you've not watched the movie, you've seen it on TikTok. It's directed by Emerald Fennell. It follows Barry Keoghan, no one knows his actual last name. His character, he has found a bit of romance for a young man, and he gets to spend a summer with this guy and his family in their big mansion. I don't want to say much more other than that if you haven't seen it, but it deals with some really interesting themes and has some really interesting imagery in there. And I understand that this movie is not going to be for everyone. And after all the hype before I watched this movie, I thought it's probably not going to be for me. But my God, did I enjoy this movie. It's about a 4 out of 5 stars for me. I think it is one of the best looking films of 2023. It looks absolutely fantastic. I don't know, maybe it's a bit cringe, but I wouldn't have minded if it had got an Oscar nom for its cinematography, because I think it looks fantastic. It's got a beautiful color grade. It's all shot on film, I'm pretty sure, and it uses Murder on the Dance Floor in an incredible way. Then I watched Maestro, which is directed by Bradley Cooper, stars Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan. This film is not what I would have hoped it would have been. It is one of the most Oscar baity films of 2023, just visually, the way it sounds, even down to the performances. It feels so Oscar baity. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just feels a little extra at times, like it's wanting a bit of attention. Bradley Cooper plays Leonard Bernstein, and it follows him as he rises to fame as a composer back in the day in the US, and it deals with his family, that whole work-life balance, and his love for music. I think the first hour of this movie I was not necessarily that on board with. It is Bradley Cooper going balls to the wall with the direction. The camera movement reminds me a lot of Damien Chazelle's camera movement. And I love Damien Chazelle. He's one of my favorite directors working today. Didn't love Babylon, but that's okay. But Damien Chazelle's direction often is that very look at me, I want an award kind of direction. I mean, it got close enough.
La La Land.
We lost, by the way. There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
So the first hour didn't really work for me. It felt like a bit of a slog, even though the camera movement was full of energy, the performances were full of energy. Weirdly enough, the second hour of this film really slows down. Its camera work becomes a lot more still, a lot more subtle. The performances become a little bit more subtle. There's a bit more of a focus on longer dialogue scenes. That is what really worked for me. When the movie was trying a little less hard at grabbing my attention is when I found myself most hooked to this movie, and I was quite emotional come the end of it. When I compare this to a lot of the other films I watched this month, it's relatively forgettable, I'll be honest. And I know some people love it, some people aren't as keen on it. And I think I just sort of sit in the middle where I'm like, it's good, but tried a little bit too hard. Then I watched Theatre Camp, which is directed by Molly Gordon and Nick Leberman. And the name sums up this movie. It is about a summer theatre camp. And it is one of the best original American comedies I've seen in a really, really long time. It's got some heart in there, but it is just a really funny romp. And as someone that did a lot of theatre as a kid, you can't help but just laugh at yourself. And that's what this movie does. It feels very much like they're laughing at themselves. They're not poking fun at a group that they don't necessarily know a lot about. This feels like people that did go on theatre camps as a kid making fun of what they did. Whether or not the directors and writers did do that, I don't know. The humor really worked for me, and I watched this on a plane and it was really awkward. I just found myself laughing out loud on the plane way too much, and it was a red-eye flight back from Japan, and I was just sort of chuckling and had to keep sort of stifling my laughs because everyone would get mad because everyone else was trying to sleep and I was just watching silly old theatre camp. Then I watched Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, directed by Kelly Fremon Craig. I was so late to the party watching this film. I absolutely adored The Edge of 17, which was Kelly's previous film. That is definitely up there in like top 30, 40, maybe 50 movies of all time. I really like Edge of 17, so I was excited going into this. It is about a young kid who is going through adolescence, right? They're going through puberty, they're navigating their way through life and looking for a bit of meaning behind it. Why do things keep happening to her? Why do her friends get to experience part of puberty before her? Why is she such a loser? She's looking for reasoning and finds herself at a place of loss at certain points in the film, because maybe there isn't reasoning and maybe life is just life. And I thought that was a really good narrative and had a lot of really good young performers in there. There were some really funny sequences. Also watched this on the plane, so I was chuckling a little bit out loud at this one. Is it as good as Edge of 17? I don't think so. I didn't have as much of an emotional connection to the story as I did with the Edge of 17, but that might also be a personal thing. This is very much more of a narrative that deals with a lot of things that a lot of young women go through, rather than Edge of 17 feels a little bit more universal, which is not a fault of this movie at all. I think it's great. The way that it showed things that you probably couldn't show on the big screen 30, 40 years ago. It draws a lot of attention to that stuff, and it got a few good laughs out of me, so I definitely recommend this one. And then I finally got to one of the movies that I missed out on last year. I watched Sarah Polley's Women Talking, and I really wish that I was there for this movie last year, because let me tell you, I thought this movie was absolutely insane. It deserved that Best Original Screenplay Oscar, because it is one of the best scripts in a long time. I think the dialogue is constantly interesting, it's engaging, it's got a limited setting, so it has to work hard to build up tension. I think the score is absolutely phenomenal. It generally feels like a work of art, and I can't wait to see what Sarah Polley's up to next, because she's clearly got a knack for what she does. And I don't think I can hound home enough how well directed this movie is and how good the performances are in this movie. I'm so glad that this got a lot of love when it came out, and I'm so mad that it wasn't me that was giving it that love. So I've gone from watching some massive, incredible movies, some of the biggest Oscar winners or Oscar buzzed movies of the last couple of years, and then after that I decided that I would watch The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, directed by the one and only Mark Webb. People my age grew up with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, right? They were so into Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. It's all I bloody heard about as a kid. I'd never watched them, but what I had watched was The Amazing Spider-Man. So my little teenage mind, when I think back to like Spider-Man as a child, it is Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Now, I've not watched either of the movies that he did since they came out, so this was like a massive going back and sort of jumping back into a childhood film that, yeah, I only watched it once or twice in around the time it came out, but I really loved it. Like, I was so into The Amazing Spider-Man as a kid, so revisiting it now, knowing the reception of it, having developed a bit more of a critical eye, I do think that these movies get shat on a little bit more than perhaps they should have. They are not the best Spider-Man movies of all time. But when you compare them to what Marvel pumps out these days, it's like, yeah, okay, I'll take that. It's not that bad. I think the web swinging is pretty good. There's some interesting moments of direction here and there. There is a lot of plot that goes wrong in this movie. I think that is sort of probably the weakest part of the movie is the script. But man, the best thing about this movie is Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. They are incredible in this movie, and they lift it up from what would be a very probably poor movie and make it something more intimate, because you see this relationship beginning to flourish. I do think that Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are a constant throughout both these movies, that their performance gets better and better. And I know, I'm pretty sure they were dating at the time, so that all resonates and comes through on screen. I'm so glad that Andrew Garfield got to close his little Spider-Man arc off in the latest Spider-Man movie, because he's a talent, and yes, he does not at all look like a school kid. Neither does Emma Stone. But, you know, I like the performances either way. Don't know what the fuck was going on with the lizard guy. Alright, on to the last 3 movies of the month. I then went on to watch Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justine Triet. Let me tell you, this could be, I've not seen all the Best Picture noms yet, but this could be my pick for Best Picture. It's sort of a whodunit movie, a lot more court focus. I really don't know how to describe this movie. It's someone dies under mysterious circumstances, and we've got to figure out whether or not this was a family-related murder. Was it an accident? Was there other people involved? It throws a lot of ideas at the table here, and it is a big slow burn. Here's the thing, comparing it to May December, I think these are very similar vibes of movies. Like I said, May December, it took about 2 hours for me to start to get what I wanted out of the movie. Anatomy of a Fall maybe took about 40-45 minutes to get there, but when it did, oh my god, the next 2 hours were incredible. It is an exhausting movie. I think it was half French, half English, so you are doing a lot of reading and a lot of fast dialogue. But it's beyond that. It is exhausting. Just the general just chatter. It's intense. And when I say exhausting, I mean it in the best way possible. I feel like I'm a member of the jury. The way they drip feed information to you in such a strategic way really does make you feel like you are sat on the jury. And I think that's an incredible way to frame this movie. It's not particularly putting a certain lens on any of the characters. You almost... It's very subjective, and yes, you do get to see some of the characters in their own elements outside of the court case, but even then, those scenes sometimes give you more questions than they do answers. The way they shoot the court scenes, it's beautifully lit, but also they do so many interesting things with the camera just to keep it interesting. I think over an hour of this movie is probably set just in one courthouse, and it never ceases to get boring, and I think that is an incredible feat. Anatomy of a Fall as a 5 out of 5 for me. Then I went on to a screening of All of Us Strangers, directed by Andrew High. This stars Andrew Scott, and it's got Paul Mescal in there, it's got Claire Foy in there. There's a good cast in this one. This is a much smaller movie than a lot of the movies I watched this month. This is about a screenwriter played by Andrew Scott as he goes to write a screenplay that addresses a lot of themes that affected him as a child, covering the death of his parents. And as he goes to write that very autobiographical screenplay, it starts to open a can of worms and bring back a few demons. And the movie is sort of him having conversations that he wishes he could have had, and it's a very emotional ride. I thought that this movie was incredible and is one of the best of 2023. I think it's a movie that is very close to After Sun for me in terms of the subtlety of some of the filmmaking, the performances, the intricacy of the writing. Thematically, it is sort of dealing with memory in the same way that After Sun does. I don't want to go too far talking about this movie because I don't want to say too much, but it does deal with a lot of stuff that After Sun does. So if After Sun thematically and tonally was something that you resonate with and you want more of that, I think this movie is up there for you and you should definitely check it out. Andrew Scott delivers a stellar performance, as does Paul Mescal and everyone else. It's amazing. I can't praise the movie enough. And one of the big things about this movie, it's not a spoiler, but you get to sit at the end. They play a fantastic track, which I won't spoil at the end of the movie, and the credits don't start rolling yet. So for a long time, you just sit there at the end of this movie, and you are soaking in your hearts are broken. I felt dead. I was like crying just at like a screen, just waiting for the credits to come up. And I thought that was just a great thing to do in the theater, where usually as soon as the credits come up, lights come on, everyone walks out and you're jarred from that emotional experience. But for this, they allowed you, I think quite intentionally, to just sit there with your emotions for like 30 seconds to a minute after the movie actually ended, before the credits started to roll. And I thought that was a really nice touch from Andrew High. I can't wait to see what he does next. I know he's directed a few things before, but I've heard that this is the movie that has really sort of burst him out of the bubble of the stuff he's made before. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more of Andrew High. I think that's a name that's going to come up a lot more in the future. And then the last movie that I watched in January was Oppenheimer. And look, I watched this when it came out in the cinema along with the rest of the world. And I was very clear in my review, which I posted on the channel, that I was aware that the movie was very good as I was watching it, but it was a super late session that I was watching it at after a long day at work, and I was ready to bed come the final hour of this movie. So I knew I wanted to revisit it, so my old mate Connor bought me the old 4K Blu-ray, and I chucked it on the big screen in the home theater. cranked that volume up. Like, that stuff was absolutely crazy. And got invested, sat down for 3 hours, and I loved it. I think this is Nolan's best movie. I think Cillian Murphy is on another level in this movie. I've referenced the Oscars a lot in this video. I think the Oscars are just a fun thing to talk about at times. I don't really care who wins or lose. I don't think it matters, but I think it's a good catalyst for conversation. And I wouldn't be mad if 2023's Oscars is the year that Oppenheimer sweeps, because I do think it looks fantastic. I think it sounds fantastic. I think Cillian Murphy deserves the Oscar for it. And I think Christopher Nolan deserves the Oscar for this one. Somehow this movie moves so fast, and I do think it moves a little too fast in the first act for me. But once you're in 30, 45 minutes in, and the pacing, you kind of get used to it. I just think that it tells a story in a really unique way. I think I got a lot more out of it on my second watch. I think I'll get even more out of it on my third watch. I genuinely, the way they shift perspectives and how that is reflected with the color on screen. It's a work of art of a blockbuster movie. After Tenet not really being for me, I was glad to have this movie that really worked for me. I'm a big fan of Oppenheimer. And very quickly, I also did watch this month Fargo Season 1, which is a series that I watched in, I think, did it come out in like 2014 or something? I watched it back then when it first aired and loved it, but for some reason, never went on to watch future seasons of it. It is an anthology series, so each series follows a different cast. Season 1 has Martin Freeman and, is it Billy Bob Thornton, I think, and a bunch of other really talented actors, and they are like crime, thriller, murder, mystery in reverse kind of series. It has such a good tone where it knows when to be serious and real, but it also does some of the most funny, interesting, exciting, laugh out loud but intense scenes on TV. It is outrageous at times, and I love it for that. And I'm keen to push on through and actually watch season 2 this time, because these guys know what they're doing. I should watch the Fargo movie, shouldn't I? I really should. That should be my homework for February. Anyways, let me know what were the big things that you guys watched in 2024 January. Please don't be afraid to subscribe. I do not bite. I will be here to talk about movies and TV as much as I absolutely can. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you in another video very, very soon. Bye-bye.